Hello, my name is Prasenjit Bhattacharya, co-founder and CEO of Great Manager Institute. Today we have with us Swaminathan Subramanian. Swami, as he is fondly called, is the Chief Operating Officer of SMFG, formerly Fullerton. Swami is an engineer from Jadavpur University and has worked with organizations like Accenture, Standard Chartered Bank, Barclays, JP Morgan, all multinationals, and big Indian organizations like Reliance Capital, and now of course SMFG, which is also a multinational, but formerly it was Fullerton. Swami, welcome.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Look forward to this podcast.
Thank you for having me over.
Help our audience know you a little bit more and tell us a little bit about your early life and your formative years, and particularly if there have been any specific influences which have shaped you at that point in time.
Sure. I'm sitting here in Mumbai. I will go back in time. I started my life in a small place in those days called Asansol. It's now a bustling mini metro, but Asansol was the place which is childhood for me. We still meet my classmates every August. Every August we find a place and we still meet.
Really?
We are that close. We are well bonded. My schoolmates are a very integral part of my life. So Asansol is where it all began. It is a coal mine headquarters, Eastern Coalfields Limited. It's the headquarters of Eastern Coalfields. And in my growing up years, I've seen coal mines, open cast mining and all of that. And my preceding two generations have been Coal India people, of course. Prior to nationalization, it was called Bengal Coal. That's where my grandfather worked. So I come from this small place. Schooling was all about Christian Brothers Association, discipline. 7 o'clock means 7 o'clock is dinner. 9 o'clock lights out is lights out. The bell rings and you've got to do stuff. I think that's also shaped a lot of how I am today. I'm seldom late I never missed a flight. I am usually the first guy in a meeting. I never miss meetings. This has been a very strong foundation, the growing up years. The other interesting thing around Asansol those days was there were some 2 or 3 schools, and your gardener's son, your milkman's son, your boss's, your father's boss's son, were all studying together. So I think it's fairly inclusive that way. And while wearing a uniform, we were a student. As a student, that's it. So there was no hierarchy, and we all went by the same school bus. We came back by the same school bus. So there was a lot of bonhomie there, and we felt like the Asansol boys. That's why I think the alumni framework has stood very strong. We do contribute back to the school. We built a impressive auditorium. We've got an Olympic-sized swimming pool there. In my days, there used to be horse riding as well. So it's one of those schools which shot into prominence, interestingly, through Bonvita quiz contest. And many people didn't know there was a school that existed until we made it to Derek O'Brien's quiz time, or whatever it was, Bonvita quiz contest.
Yes.
And there were the big schools like Campion, and there was Lovedale, Ooty, and all of that, and we were there. And that's when people kind of first time took note of a good school in Asansol, and we still remember those days. One of my classmates is now the principal, and he's the longest standing principal of the school. So that's something which unites us still. So I have very, very fond memories and of that township, of the school environment, the discipline, and then there was home, of course. And home was all grandfather for me.
So were you a day scholar, or you were staying in the hostel? Or?
It was interesting. There were times of the year when I was in school, in hostel, but very rarely. But otherwise, I was a day scholar by definition. So school was very far from home. And if there were any activities to be done later on in the evening or on an odd occasion, I would stay back. But by then, I would see, waiting for the bus, I would see that sports time has begun. They've blown the whistle. Guys are in the sports uniform and they're gone. Lunchtime was when the bell rang. All the hostelites would be at lunch, and when the lunch bell will go, whether you got to eat or you not got to eat, that's it. So you got to be back in class. So it was a good blend of experience to see how a hostel life pans out in front of you. And then there is home as well, where I was shaped a lot in my life through my grandfather.
Yes, tell me a little bit about your grandfather and his influence as you grew up.
So Grandpa was the first generation Coal India person. He worked even after retirement, cycling to another place of work within the township till he was 75. So you can very well make out, here is a man who would say that, I'm going to work till I die. Very simple, had a very senior position, but very simple. Cycled, as I said to you. He had access to jeeps in those days as the common mode of transport in the coal mines. Integrity. He is one person who would say, I would walk away from any form of other inducements, but integrity, discipline, and hard work. Some of these values would never go away, would never leave me. I think those are the values which have stayed with me. Conservatism, if I were to say conservatism, we were never seen as people who could actually do business. So it was frowned upon. The employment that we were geared towards was to work again in a public sector organization which would give you lifetime employment and a pension thereafter and medical facilities. This is typically how my previous two generations have lived. Business was out of question, and it wasn't seen as a very ethical area to get into. So emphasis on education, of course. And lastly, as a typical Tamil Brahmin family raises their son, you first become an engineer, then you decide what you want to do in life. So I guess that was pretty much preordained, that you first got to become an engineer and then you decide what you want to do.
And that's when you did your engineering, and again you did your engineering from Jadavpur University. Now, of course, Jadavpur is now known as a place with very strong students' unions and so on and so forth. Tell us a little bit about your time in Jadavpur University.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. I think one of the reasons I chose to study there after joint entrance and you have options to choose institutes was that it got me to be in a city in Kolkata. And I really wanted to exploit the city life. Coming out of Asansol after 12th, needed to have a bit of fun. Fun for us was roaming around on bikes, college festivals. It's a culturally vibrant city, as you know. So there were festivals. I discovered a singer in me, and it was a lot of fun. Kolkata was, foodie. I became a complete foodie in there. In a South Indian family, Brahmin family, you are told not to eat non-vegetarian food. That's when I went out and ate. So there was a rebel that came out in me to say, I will not do public sector, I will not marry in my community, I will not abide by vegetarian food, and I did all kinds of stuff. So that was a very, very interesting phase of life. I think I discovered a lot of myself, which was bottled in me during my school days under a uniform, under discipline. I look at Calcutta days as very, very, very fondly as somebody who discovered myself during that time. Of course, academics was paramount. I did all right. I actually managed to even grab a gold medal towards the end because others were having more fun than me, I guess. But they were all bright guys. So that institute also had, interestingly, as you mentioned, Prasenjit, they also had a fair amount of unionism and activism in those days as well. So there was Mandal Commission during my time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I got arrested too. We used to be taken to far off place like Barrackport Trunk Road, and then let off, and they asked your father's name, and we all gave some other name, of course. And those are interesting one, fasting and procession and all of that. I remember very interestingly during that time, we were protesting against the commissioner of police office. And one of my close friends was also doing, shouting slogans along with me. And he turned out to be much later a friend and a future, shall we say, classmate. It was his father.
Was the commissioner.
It was the commissioner.
And he was shouting slogans.
He was shouting slogans along with us. Yeah. So there were very, very interesting moments during those days. But wonderful institute, integrated campus. That's another interesting part about Jadavpur University is it's an integrated campus. You have arts and science and all the other disciplines as well. So it was a good.
So unlike Asansol,
yes,
this was the first time you actually got to interact with the RT types or
yes.
people who are very different from
yes.
The boys. I assume Asansol was the boys' school.
It was a complete boys' school.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Of course, there was a girls' school nearby, but then my school was a boys' school. But this was an integrated campus and culturally again vibrant. We used to bring in a lot of bands into the institute. It was a matter of pride for these guys to perform at Jadavpur University. We used to get Bangladeshi bands and all of that. So it was quite interesting.
Is that when you also started speaking Bengali or you already knew?
Bengali was there from the beginning. In fact, I struggled to choose what was second language for me, whether it should be Hindi or Bengali. Because my family was indifferent and ignorant. I just did a tick in the box and I chose Hindi, and Bengali turned out to be a third language.
Okay.
And I can read and write. Even now, I can translate into. I'm married to a Bengali.
Yes, that's another thing we have in common.
I'm married to a Bengali, but she's a Bengali raised in Mumbai, and I can still translate the script for her in English.
This is so interesting because my wife was raised in Malaysia and it's a Bengali family, but I can read the Bengali script and she could not. So therefore, absolutely the same thing that you mentioned, and this is fascinating. So now, of course, a little bit of Jadavpur would mean a little bit of questioning. And as someone says that you can't be a leader if you didn't have leftist inclination at college, and you can't be a leader if you continue to have leftist inclination when you are in a senior role at corporate. What's been your transition in corporate? Help us to understand the movement, and has there been any turning points in that journey which shaped you as a leader?
Yes, you're so right. I think if I reflect back, I think that whole environment, you didn't hesitate to question authority. Of course, it was a lot more effervescent and rebellious in those days of your own evolution, and it gets more refined along the way. I mean, even here in this stage of life, you wouldn't hesitate. One wouldn't hesitate to question, but then obviously in a more appropriate and in a cordial manner. My boss actually was my mentor, and I've been very lucky to have a boss like him. Very fondly, sometimes calls me an Axelite. So he must be seeing some sparks in me, which leads him to believe that there is some Naxalite in me.
I will call you an urban Naxalite, not an urban Naxalite. So you are very sophisticated.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So that Jadavpur environment, as you said rightly, it provokes something in you, and it makes you express yourself a lot more without any hesitation, questioning status quo and authority. But typically in Bengal, there's a lot more spoken than done.
Yes.
So I guess that was more about how you speak, and of course the development or self-development of elocutions and speeches and debates and all of that was very much part of those 4 years of growing up. Calcutta is very, very rich in all this, as you know.
Yes, absolutely. I think all-round personality development
Yes.
that you can get in an environment like that is very different from even an IIT. Of course, some IITs are better than other IITs, where you are not unidimensional. And help us understand your transition, because in between you were a graduate engineer trainee for some time, and then you decided to go ahead and do your MBA from XLRI. Tell us a little bit about that transition.
So given that I broke away from the tradition of public sector, I had to get a job first. So from my engineering college, I got placed in a company engineering as who hired me as a graduate engineer trainee. So I worked for a year, and my motivation was that I need to earn money. I knew that I would study further at some point in time, but then I knew that will require money, and I needed to save up, so I needed to get to start working. So that was one. Amongst the opportunities I got on campus, I chose the one which was far away from Kolkata. I worked in Gujarat. And during that time, of course, understanding a lot about first time out of Calcutta. I still remember boarding the train, and my mother thought that I was leaving for good. No mobile phones, right? So no mobile phones, no way of keeping in touch. Drop me a postcard kind of conversation. It's almost like you're seeing the son off to say he's going to head it in a faraway land, and God knows what he's going to do. And then the 1 year of work experience was fantastic. Again, as a self-development area, because I was at the construction site. I was a civil engineer, so at a construction site, and they asked you to kind of manage labor, manage budget, and get the job done. Quality. You are sweating it out under the sun. Managing labor. They would sometimes stall work. This is the stuff that goes on, right? And they would stall work. Either it is money or is it somebody spoke badly. These are the things you start seeing the interactions, and you see how they are motivated. That was quite interesting. And I realized two things at that time. If you want to get something done, you need people, you need capital. And I realized in order to get there, to be able to allocate resources or to be able to allocate budget is going to take me another 35-40 years to get there, if you were to work through the ranks of delivery and all the way there. And at least that was the belief in those days. And I said, I got to do something to accelerate this, and and it sounds very boilerplate, but the engineer MBA combination was a very well understood formula in those days. So having got some money which will pay for my MBA course, at least the first installment, I kind of started taking exams, and that's I made it to XLRI at the time. Very interesting experience of making it to XLRI I would like to share. I was in this place called Singrauli, and I was being trained as a power plant engineer, and we were 13 of us graduate engineer trainees who were posted in Singrauli. And a telegram came there to home, and then home found a way to reach me through some PCO and the headquarters, saying that there's a call from XLRI that's come for interview. And that was like day after tomorrow, because there were delays in between. So when the communication came and when they informed me, I had to attend an interview in Bombay day after tomorrow. And I just had to leave Singrauli. You got to get to Banaras. You got to travel by bus from Banaras. Obviously, there's no reservation, so you got to get into a train, whichever it was. And I found a place near the loo and above stacks of stuff. And then you reach Mumbai, and in a couple of hours is your interview. So walked into St. Xavier's College, which was the venue for the interview. Went into the washroom, took napkins to wipe myself. And then showed up in the interview, and finished up and went back to VT station to look which train is there to go back to Singrauli, because there the manager was saying, how can you take your time off like this and go away? So it's a very, very interesting experience, I would say, with adventures mixed into it to basically say, this is how you finally make it, and then you get informed that you got selected. And I said, well, this is a new journey.
Was human resources your choice, or because XLRI MBA could be in many areas, isn't it?
In my various exploration and experimentation with myself, that's the best way to put it, I must have been very blurred in what I ticked as a box. And it happened to be XLRI, HR, PGDMPMIR, whatever it was. That's fine. I mean, as long as I get into a good institute, we'll figure it out. And but it turned out to be good.
Before I ask you about who are or what would be your leadership experiences, or who are the leaders who have inspired you and impacted you, let me ask the second obvious question. After working in all of these multinationals, you jumped straight back to two organizations which are very different. Reliance Capital is probably as different from maybe a Barclays as it can be, or a JP Morgan. And then those days, Fullerton was also struggling to establish itself, as a player. And what was that transition about?
Here is the company, my first Indian company. First of all, my choice of Indian company was because my family constraints prevented me from living overseas anymore. So I realized that if you are still going to be not mobile in a multinational company and move towards where the regional or the global headquarters were, you won't experience growth or a full awareness or understanding and make a much more meaningful contribution as you become more senior. So I planted myself in India. Several of my ex-colleagues or batchmates have built their lives internationally. So if I had to be in India, I wanted to now work with stalwarts in the Indian company and learn something. Culturally, and here is my first day, and that determines the culture. I walked into this large Indian corporation thinking that there would be a grand induction plan, which is what you come to expect when you are in a multinational company, and they'll show you around. There will be various training sessions, and there will be all of those. And the conversation started with my first day. Where are we on this? We have been speaking since the interview days till now, and there have been several interactions. And then this very senior person starts off by saying, okay, so we've had all these conversations, so where are we on this? So it was like, I mean business from day one. And that is something you need to adopt to and say, let me come back to you kind of conversations. The other thing is, multinational companies teach you to be a lot compliant. I think in these companies which are more entrepreneurial, the Indian companies, they actually say, of course, compliance is not something to be frowned upon, but what are other opportunities that you need to think? How can you look at more innovative ways of doing things? So entrepreneurship is very strongly ingrained in these companies to make you more bolder, not be afraid of failure. Your goal post is not to be eventually compliant. You need to be compliant along the way, but that wasn't the be all and end all. You need to be creating something. You need to be creating value for the organization, and all the Indian promoters obviously looking for building growth, some are into nation building, and eventually, of course, the shareholders. The whole view about what you are creating in terms of market value, reputation, giving to the community, or nation building, as it may be in some cases. There was that angle which I didn't see in the multinational organization, at least at my levels that I operated.
That hunger for growth, and whether it is Reliance, whether it is Vedanta, whether it is ICICI, the erstwhile time when KV Kamath, etc., was driving growth like crazy. And even now, what comes in the way of many multinationals in a country like India, where you have potential to grow, provided you are willing to get out of your top of the pyramid kind of mindset. And as you rightly said, you have to take some amount of risks.
Yes.
But risks with not just the objective of making money by dubious means, risks with the higher purpose of making a big impact. And that's what all of these companies have done.
Absolutely. In fact, my boss and mentor, who's been a career risk person, of course, and a very successful CEO at that, has always told me that the role of a risk manager is to take risks, but it has to be calculated, calibrated, contained with mitigants and stuff.
Very interesting. This is the first time I heard this definition, that the role of a risk manager is to take risks.
To take risks. And of course, calculated, calibrated mitigation processes in place. Otherwise, you can be in the safe zone and you can play within the safe zone. So my transition, I guess, the previous question you asked about multinational environment versus, at least at my level and my own personal experience, I'm not generalizing this, has been a lot more in this period where I went and worked with Indian companies. In fact, again, as I said, my superior says to me that you and along with a couple of other colleagues who came back to this company, which is now Fullerton, formerly Fullerton and now SMFG India Credit, that you guys came back as different people. And I think each one of us who joined at the leadership level have had this experience. It has done something to wanting to do something to make a difference, build scale, or start up something as a new product, new business opportunity, or be more courageous, bold, decisive, I would say. I think the word I would say decisive is a very important word that comes to my mind. Because ultimately you can go on pushing paper around the place and say somebody's got to come together, take a decision. But when you are in these positions, you got to say, okay, I've seen enough alternatives, and you got to make a recommendation to your bosses, to the board, to the shareholders, and say, well, I think this is what we want to do, and that is the shift that one needs to make within to have the courage of your convictions. To have the courage of your convictions is very, very important.
And it is, there are two perspectives. I was talking to the CEO of a very well-known multinational, global brand, and similar case with a foreign bank, and they both said the same thing. They said the average term of a senior executive is 3 years. And therefore the mindset is don't upset the apple cart. Because I have to look forward to my next assignment, which might be in another country for all you know. So, and in banks there's a joke that every time you have a new CEO who comes from somewhere else, first year is about blaming the predecessor, and then all doing away with the bad loans and so on and so forth. And the third year is all about giving loans like crazy so that your order book, etc., and the book position is far better. And then, of course, the next guy repeats the whole cycle, right? Now,
I had a slightly different take on this one. I mean, I take it in a very lighter vein. What you said is the three envelope story that you're talking about. I get what you're saying, but I think here again there is a difference in empowerment. Our organization today that I'm part of, or the Indian organizations that I've very recent past been part of, have decision-making authority, and the kind of authority for running the company and be accountable for the outcomes. There's a big difference between the way I have seen the organizations that I have been part of, or at least the line of sight I had. Let me qualify this. The line of sight I had was about what the global institution things they want to do, and they would look at it from a geography standpoint and take certain decisions. I've seldom seen, at least the organizations that I've been part of, to say every country is an investment and every country then takes that investment and it wants to create its own charter of growth. And that I'm seeing now in my current organization, which I haven't seen in the previous organizations, in multinational organizations. So it's about the fabric as to how they've constructed the decision making. It makes a big difference in how you view India, its potential growth, and rely on the judgment skills of people here, and equally hold them accountable for delivery or not, is very entrepreneurial.
You know, if you look at your current organization, that's also a business transformation case study. And many of you came back and there has been a change in management team. But how do you, looking with hindsight, how has this whole thing been scripted in a manner, and what are the key components of that transformation?
So, our boss, he came back, who's run the organization very, very successfully in the same organization very previously and very successfully, came back to this company, and a few of us joined him, and then we built teams along the way. This was during pandemic, and we weren't even coming to office regularly in those days. Those were the days where, you know, people had given up premises and they were trying to cut costs. And the confidence levels on the ground were low. You weren't vaccinated, you didn't know. There were some anti-vaxxers in some pockets, or the others didn't have the means. So our first role was to get the confidence back, and health was the first important criteria. Business was important too, but I think if you didn't have the people and you didn't have them confident to hit the streets, is very important. So I think we did that role quite well, because it was the most important thing to do that. If you were to get people out of their homes, then you got to make them feel safe. So we ran campaigns. We took care of health. We took care of vaccinations and what have you. And then that was quite a good, interesting phase which we've never seen in our lives. Never ever seen. I'm sure I speak for many other organizations as well. I mean, it's not just unique to me. But yeah, I mean, that was the first thing. Since you said transition of management, in that context, I'm saying that the transition of management, the first important thing was to do this. Then, of course, we had to bring pretty good talent back again. I mean, some of them had left, or some of the positions were vacant. So because these things tend to happen during the pandemic, right? It's because, you know, people take very crazy moves at the time, and it's well documented. A lot of people actually say, I want to go back to my hometown and do whatever it is. There's freelancing, there's moonlighting, and whatever else that came into play. So I think this was the constructing the team back again was very important to. And
that actually meant that you probably had to put in that money to get some of these good quality people in.
Yes.
At a time when the business itself was not doing that well.
Yes. So I think we thank the shareholders, the board. My boss keeps saying that the first thing you got to do is get your generals in place. You can always find soldiers along the way, but the generals shape the organization. And more importantly, the word I borrow from him is the fabric of the organization comes from the kind of tone that you set at the top. And we are a business of lending, and there has to be integrity. There has got to be those very strong tenets of compliance, process, all of that. I think this was very important. The phase, I would break it into phases. This whole recrafting journey was to get confidence back, build the team, the fabric, the leadership. And I say this in the context of pandemic, because it did bring about a lot of changes in preferences that people had built in industry, as you're aware. People prefer to do other things. So this was a good challenge, and of course there was a change of shareholding, and then change of board, and constructing that, and very fortunate to have very, very eminent personalities who eventually joined the board and kind of support us till date. Then of course the change in branding of the organization and of course this emphasis on scale. We were always deemed to be a good quality company, but never had scale. So this tone was set up in the last 2 to 3 years, which we are still running, and of course we have a long way to go, is about building scale, and of course building everything else that can support scale.
Let me understand this a little bit deeper. Would it be correct to say that there was no grand change in strategy? It's not that you got products which never existed before. It's just that you spent a lot of time getting the right talent, building the right culture, and then focus on scale as almost like a DNA or a core value. But how do you do that? Organizations who are used to growing at 5, 10, 15% and suddenly without any major change in product or technology or any of those things, how do you get them to imbibe a mindset where 50%, 100% growth is possible?
I think you said a very important word in your question, mindset. And my boss makes it very, very clear to everyone who cares to listen, is that shed this small company mindset. You would do a few things if you have that mindset, and that served us for a few years in our previous stint. Let's say we call that 1.0 and we call it 2.0 now, for want of anything else. Now people have walked into a very different mindset. And the leadership messages are very, very strong. If you need the different sort of people, we brought a different sort of people. You need a very different tech platform. Throwing the old aside, building a large, scalable, sturdy, flexible, scalable platform is very important. So quadrupled investments in technology. Thinking big in terms of large external partnerships and so on has been a very different mindset. As they say in cricket, right? You walk in with basically saying you want to be at a run rate of 140, 150, or you want to play out the innings. It's been the former for us in this approach, to say you've got to hit it out of the park, and you got to take some risks along the way. And as I said, in all of this, there has to be very strong support of the board and our bosses, and they have been very supportive. It's not easy to take that call and a mindset unless you're backed by a very strong set of investors and seniors who actually say, please take that leap. And then, of course, it's the translation down the line.
And what I hear you saying is that if leadership has belief in that growth story, and maybe some of the leaders have changed and they have changed in your case, but bulk of the organization are the same people, and the same people start demonstrating a different mindset, which flows from the top. Is that what you are saying?
Yes, it's in some cases there have been different people. So we've had to bring in different set of people in some pockets. But as you rightly said, we are talking about 25,000-30,000 people.
Yes. And
it's not as if we've changed the whole place, right? It's not possible. But the thought process is very different. You're making, as I told you, quadrupling a technology budget is not an easy thing for a company to take as a decision.
Absolutely.
And we are talking about large scale investments, pretty bold ones, which will change the shape and the kind of infrastructure we need to be able to scale up the business. It's an ambition statement. It is being lived day in and day out. It requires very, very hard work. It does build pressure. I'll be honest to admit it does build a tremendous amount of pressure, but with a very good longer term view about where you want to get to. I think that's a very important part as to how people are now aspiring to say, we want to be of this size, this scale, this profitability. rather than just, as I say, using a cricketing term, playing within your crease. You don't want to play within a crease anymore.
An illustration of this transformation is your own journey. You've been in HR, and of course your exposure is great across industries, across geographies, but from being the chief people officer to being the chief operating officer, which in an industry and an organization like yours is, is it that is the hottest role that one can have, or the heat is the maximum?
Heat is fine. I'm not sure about the hottest role, but
the heat is maximum for that particular role.
Yeah.
And now that you are the chief operating officer and you look back at your old self, Swami, who is the chief people officer, are there some areas where you smile and say, hey, that was silly of me at that point in time, and with this perspective, probably if I had this perspective, I would have thought differently. Is there anything that you would have thought differently with the perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I have a very, very successful and capable CHRO who grown from within and who reports to me. And I probably have very less time that I devote to HR. But two things. One is my respect for the function has grown even more. Looking at it slightly from outside, not slightly, because I also have a leg stand there. To say how much would the organization depend on this function? It's enormous. And I've never seen it from outside in, from the function, the way that I do today. And the function is, or the leader is a confidant. You do have to bear your soul somewhere, and people used to do that when I was doing that role, and now I'm not doing that with our CHRO. And pour your issues, concerns, help. The organization needs to be orchestrated. People need to be brought together. Sometimes there are warring factions that need to be resolved. I think I see the function from outside in as a very, very crucial function. It cements the organization together. That's a very, very important thing. The second thing is, if I were to look back and to your question, to sort of play the role again, I would. There's one learning I've had, Prasenjit, I think I'm saying. I wouldn't become a prisoner of my processes. I would differentiate between what is priority a little bit more than the other areas, because we tend to, as HR professionals, become more socialistic, because we are driving an agenda for the full company. I would now chop the organization to different pieces, because there are some very pivotal, and that could be points in time. It doesn't have to be for keeps. There could be some pivotal parts of the organization which needs extra care, protection, treatment, retention, all of that stuff versus the rest. And that can be transient. It can change from time to time. The second thing is, when I said about, let me explain myself, when I said I won't become a prisoner of my process, is to say, the generic approach of the discipline of HR is to say, you've got to give opportunities to people and, train them, groom them, and so on and so forth. I think if I were to reflect on myself, I have an appetite, but it has become less than what it was. It would be a delight to see people who would shift gears and perform better, but at the same time, I wouldn't waste too much time in that area. Because it will cost the company, and I would rather replace and go on.
But that's a very bold statement to make.
I would, but because there is a time and place for this. We are at that juncture in the company where we are accelerating very fast, and we have to be mindful about cost. We have to be mindful about productivity, and drive. As I said to you, the drive is very important. And we just had this conversation about mindset change and all of that. Sometimes you would find in such a fast-paced transition that we are into, that you may not find somebody adaptable to this kind of an environment. In which case, you can't wait for 3 years until the organization stabilizes and say, I'm going to keep a set of people. because they can make or break the journey that you are into right now. I would say that, as I said, there is an appetite to groom and develop in all of that, which we are doing. We're doing with you, and successfully at that. But there are instances where you got to take decisions quickly, and I have become more amenable to those decisions than I was before wearing the CHRO hat. That's an honest admission, confession.
Yeah, and I think what I hear you saying is that not everything within the defined time frame that you have in business can be solved by the development route alone. And
Yes.
you need the right people, the right talent at the right place.
Yes.
And therefore, while there is scope for developing people, a large number of people, when it comes to those critical roles, you have to get people to be ready really, really fast, because that's the results that you seek.
Yes. Or you can slip, otherwise you might slip on your agenda, because it all hands on deck. As I said again, this is the phase that we are going through. I want to qualify the phase that we are going through, and we talked about this earlier in our discussion, is about mindset change, rapid scaling up, bold decisions, big investments, very hard work, many hours a day. It requires a different mindset. And if something isn't fitting in at that point in time, you would rather make that change sooner than live with it to say it will correct at some point.
Swami, one of the issues in social media these days is about toxic workplaces and toxic managers. You talked about the work that you are doing with your people managers, and there are very few organizations who are actually doing that kind of work. In reality, in your industry, it's a very high pressure industry. People are driven by incentives, particularly in sales, and targets are very important. So sometimes managers lose their cool. And it's also true that not everybody in the younger generation has the resilience that maybe some of us built up over a period of time with multiple failures. Do you have a view on what is happening here, the need for higher productivity vis-a-vis the need to avoid toxicity?
The work pressures are true. I wouldn't hide behind work-life balance sound bites. There is an imbalance, and depending on the stage and phase of a company, there will be strong acceleration. There will be better years where you will be more calibrated. So there are, it's like go ahead and accelerate when the environment is conducive, and everyone looks at some economic indicators to say let's do it now. And there are those phases where companies will accelerate, and it's not easy when you accelerate. It's like you're in a train, the train is accelerating, your body will lurch forward, and there will be discomfort. I think there is a difference between managing work pressures and toxicity. I think the word you used was toxicity, which is why I want to segregate the two. They are used synonymously, Prasenjit, which I would not use it synonymously. I think there will be words exchanged at the workplaces, because we are all humans and we have a home, we have the workplace and all of that, and we have all of us are juggling multiple things. But it is about what you do after. That is very important. I think, notwithstanding an argument or a difference of opinion, or probably simply giving a very hard instruction to say, come what may, this needs to be done now or tomorrow, no later. These things you get to hear at the workplace. But I guess it's what you do after. If there is an appreciation of work actually that has gotten done, even if it is a part, in technology we call it sprints. I think we can use it more generically. At every sprint, if there is a breather, if there is a celebration, or very, very at the very least, that some manager says that, I know we had these words, but then it turned out well, wasn't it? Aren't you proud of it? Could we have accomplished if we didn't put ourselves into that kind of position. And then it boils down to personal equations. I think people need to, in a closer, in departments or in colleagues, they need to have some equation. It's like you go to your backslapping buddy over so many years, and you can say things to the person. Right? You can abuse, you
without
can say
offending.
Without offending, and you know that the person is not going to, or will say Swami or Prasenjit is in a bad mood, but generally not like that. Will forgive you, or come to accept you. Ki this is how he is, but he's good at heart, because he shows his good side on some other areas. He'll back me up if there is something. He'll go up there and say, I am to blame, not my subordinate, because somebody's got to take the fall somewhere, notwithstanding what's happened in the argument, right? So that is a sign to say he'll stand up for me. Second is, would reward me commensurate with my work, would appreciate me in front of colleagues, or would, when I'm really in a personal distress, would be by my side. There are those life events that happen at the workplace where the organization shows its support and care in crunch times. I think several other heated arguments along the way will be dusted aside if the person has that one memory of the organization having her or his back or stood by this person, because that kind of gesture or that kind of equation that gets set can totally make one forgive the other along the way. And I think end of the day it's like two friends having a complete spat or an argument and then go off for a drink and laugh it off. I think the second part needs to happen too. I don't know if people are finding the time, because time is precious, to be able to do the second part of it. Because I don't think the first part is avoidable. People can calibrate themselves, but there will be those, we are all humans. There will be those times where there will be those behaviors which will come out of something that needs to be done with urgency and things like that. But the second part is what I was trying to say is very important to balance it out.
This is something which has also bothered me quite a bit, because I fall in that category, I think, where I'm not as consistent in terms of respectful behavior, but I am almost invariably genuine. So people know that if I lose my cool, some customer's query has not been answered after 3 reminders, I lose my cool, and that doesn't impact the lunch that I'm going to have with the same person next day, and I'm not carrying that again. But it requires a set of time, some amount of time period for a person to see my track record. Yes. That I stood by him, that I cared for him, that I celebrated his achievement. And that is, I think, the challenge in today's context, because people have fleeting sort of windows, and in that window either you build trust or you lose trust by the kind of behavior that you display. And I think it is not so much what you say, it is the power imbalance which forces a person to feel that he cannot assert himself or herself. In context of a friend, you say something and the other person also says something back, or he knows at least that he can if he wants to. So this is a very, very...
On that note, I have an appeal to make, if I may, to actually say, at least for at least the younger professionals, do not be too quick to judge the organization, and if you do that, then you will not see a holistic picture. It takes some time to see the different aspects and character of the organization. Then be very transactional. Take a judgment based on a transaction. I know it's difficult, but if you allow, like Prasenjit rightly said, if you allow for time, you will be able to see different shades of love, tough love, and whatever else that goes with it, and you will be able to see it in entirety. I think that's an important feeling I've had. I've also had starts which have not been great, but it's worked out eventually well. It's about getting to know each other much better.
Yes. And I think the message for the managers would be that every week in India, there are about 50 suicides because of workplace stress. Not all of them are because of managers, but all of them, without exception, had a manager. And I think, therefore, once in a while, if you were to just ask your team members, how was their day? If you were to talk to them as a person and not just somebody who is doing his key result areas or the tasks, nobody else can do it, because nobody else has this guy for 8 hours a day, and many times the family also is clueless. So it's an opportunity for a manager to make a real difference in the lives of people. And on that note, the last example that I would like from you, Swami, is tell us about a manager who really made an impact on you, who in some sense inspired you and maybe even transformed you in some ways. And what was that story all about, and what did this manager do?
Yeah, my longest standing manager is my current manager, and several things. It's not one. I keep joking with him. There are a lot of isms, as they say, no. There are Siddhu-isms and as they say, Buddhisms kind of stuff. There are some isms which you kind of catch on to. Many things that I've said during this interview as well, I've got snippets of what I've learned from him by sheer observation, like risk management to take risks, how you need to protect the fabric of the organization. I think my current boss would have taught me how to, from my wardrobe, redoing my wardrobe, to food, to communication skills, to take decisions, to take some risks and take on some areas of which you, as I said, uncharted waters, to how you present yourself to the board. Again, boils down to communication and all of that. It's been a very well-rounded. It's not one thing, right? It's a very well-rounded development, I would say. You could have sent me for a business school leadership program, Harvard or something like that. But this day-to-day interaction, coaching, is very difficult to get by, and I think I would say, and my fellow colleagues would agree to this. It's not just me, that it's a daily learning. It's a daily learning of. And then you pick up stuff, what he or she would do. And in my case, my boss would say, you would always think to, let's say if he's away from work on something, you ask yourself, what would he do in this situation? Because you've observed the person for such a long time. And say, okay, this is the most likely thing to do. In fact, I'll say something interesting to you. And there was a very stressful period at work, and we were rebuilding something which was broken, and I was working with a couple of consultants, one based out of Canada and one based in Singapore, and the Canada conversation will happen at 11 o'clock at night, and the Singapore conversation will happen at 7 in the morning, and I didn't want to disturb him during this time, because you're coordinating between two consultants with different time zones, and you have to take some decision at the time. Such was the situation that he had to take a decision at the time. And then I landed up speaking to him at a more earthly hour, and I said, boss, this is what I have done. Now this is what I have decided. So I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, or whether you will be angry with me or not for having not consulted you, but I didn't want to disturb you. He said to me, what would you do if you were in my position? Who would you consult? It's accountability, whether I get it right or wrong, is what feels right, you go with it. And that's what you've done. Live with the decision. And these are, I think, I would say, rather than this, whether it's a KRA check in the box or whether I was ranked in my performance rating or not, good or bad or ugly, I think this kind of learning, someone says that, what were the options available to you? What was your thought process and why you took this decision? Now, I would teach you something else. Learn to live with your decision. I would say, it's changed the way I think. I'm deeply indebted and grateful to have such people, and it's a chance of fate to get to work with people who happen to be your manager also, are a mentor as well, and not just looking at you at the workplace, but looking at all-round development. And it is true what I said to you, and we're starting from wardrobe to food to communication to everything else. He would score us.
And if you were to ask me the reason why you look at that as a gift,
Yes.
rather than as an interference, is because you believe that he genuinely cares about your well-being.
Yes.
And you would not take the same stuff. For example, if I were to comment on your wardrobe or something like that, and I'm talking about in general.
Yeah, sure.
And therefore, that ability to, we have something that we talk about great bosses, the ability to connect, develop, and inspire.
Yeah.
And I think that ability to connect is fundamental,
Yes.
which is about building trust in the relationship. And I think that also brings us to the end of this podcast with the realization that you may be a functional expert, you might be a technical expert, you may know about the industry, but at the end, leadership is an act of helping your team realize their potential. And sometimes potential which they themselves don't believe in or didn't realize that they had.
Fantastic. I stand by that statement to say, if my superiors and my boss in particular had not pushed me into a zone which was not in my slot, I would never have found out that I could contribute in these areas. It was just unconceivable. So
absolutely. So therefore, here is the challenge to all leaders and those who want to be leaders. When was the last time you reposed your trust and gave a challenging task to somebody, a task that person had not done before, which was not backed up by a past track record, and you told that person, don't worry, I believe in you, but I'm here to cover your back. And that, I think, is a big lesson that I take away. Thank you.
Thank you
for your time.
Thank you. It has been wonderful speaking to you all.